where Richard is from. We want to take you to London, and if you haven't seen these images, stick around because there have been riots, there have been fires. Look at this, looting, all of this connected to violence, a shooting death of a 29-year-old man. Now we have learned that the British Prime Minister, David Cameron, has been vacationing in Italy. Because of this, he's coming home, back to 10 Downing Street. We'll explain this for you next. I don't know if you've seen these images out of London here, but this is day 3 of these riots. Buildings, cars on fire, some gangs of youth attacking one police car, shops looted. Take a look at these images. This is all linked to the shooting death of a 29-year-old man. His name was Mark Dugan. All of this happening in one particular neighborhood within London. This man was shot to death inside of a cab on Thursday. Let's go to Dan Rivers. He is in the thick of things on the street amidst all this rioting. Dan, to you.
Yeah, it looks like the police are about to sort of slowly move forward. You can see the dogs, dog handlers and police dogs are here. At the end of this road where there are blue lights flashing, I don't know if you can see all the way down there, that's where there were a lot of people gathered. And then inside this supermarket, just off to your left as you're looking at the screen, that's where there's been a lot of looting going on. We were seeing people walking out with TVs and so on. And getting pelted from this direction that you're facing now by youths with look like bottles and bits of concrete and so on. So it does look like the police are about to move in. Let's just swivel around this way and you can see the police coming out with their long shields. I, like a lot of journalists, have done the kind of riot training with the police, and it must be said their training is incredibly realistic for this kind of stuff. And they do this fairly regularly, this kind of training with petrol bombs as well. They will use, real petrol bombs to keep this as real as possible, the training that they do. But obviously nothing quite prepares you for what it's like in reality on the ground, because it's so fluid and that, things come at you from all sorts of different directions.
Dan Rivers, and you saw a bulletproof vest, helmet in London. Let me be specific. He was in Peckham, that's in Lewisham, that's in southeast London as these riots continue. As we mentioned, first time broad daylight today, day 3, and now, of course, as night has fallen, you saw those images of buildings, cars on fire, looting as well, all linked to the shooting death of this 29-year-old father of 4. Gordon Brown, again, Prime Minister, leaving his vacation in Italy, heading home, heading to 10 Downing Street to be part of this investigation into what is going on in London. We have a couple other... Want to continue this story out of London. As I mentioned, and I misspoke, Prime Minister David Cameron, he is the one heading back from Italy now, from vacation, because of these scenes, these riots, these fires, the looting that we've seen playing out in the streets of London. I want to go live to Dan Rivers. Dan, again, is in Peckham, that's in Lewisham, and southeast London. And Dan, just set the scene for me. Tell me what you've been seeing, and just put this in perspective. What started all of this?
Just the most extraordinary amounts of public disorder here, Brooke. You can see behind me there's a police team of dog handlers who've come in to secure this supermarket, which, as you can see, if we take a walk over here, was being looted by a gang of several dozen young people. You can see all the windows smashed out here. We're told the staff clearly must have been terrified, went and took refuge on the roof. But this is just kind of emblematic of the wider picture here in Peckham. We've been watching sustained rioting, really, with volleys of stones and bottles and so on coming over. Every so often the police will charge forward and try and retake a piece of territory. But this isn't just the only place this is happening in London, happening in a number of hotspots around London. All originally triggered by the shooting of a young man in up in Tottenham on Thursday, in a predominantly sort of ethnic minority area. That sparked a protest by his family that then rapidly snowballed into something much bigger. And I don't think this down here has got anything to do with that shooting. This is all about opportunistic criminality, really, people just taking the chance to go in. We've seen people taking what look like TVs and DVDs out of this supermarket, just helping themselves, really, because there was no one here to stop them for quite some time. Now, order has been restored here, but you can see the place is just littered with broken glass and so on. One can only imagine if you're a resident living around here, you must have been absolutely terrified. And the most bizarre thing of all this, you just have a look down here, there's a bag of rice that someone's even taken out and emptied on the floor. The most bizarre thing is that there are quite a lot of children here as well that we saw out on the streets, really young kids, sort of 5, 6 years old, in the middle of all this. You know, goodness only knows what they would have made of all this. But now, anyway, Brooke, this looks like it's calmed down. The gang has dispersed. I don't know what the situation is on the main highway up there where we had been, but certainly we've seen gangs just roaming the streets in hoods and so on. Very, very scary indeed.
Well, we're looking at you, Dan, and it does look fairly calm where you are, and we had an image. Guys, tell me in my ear, were those live pictures of that fire? It was taped, so it was moments ago, but still, as we're seeing these images play out, Dan, just so I'm hearing you right, some of these images, some of the rioting, this could be just copycat. This is not at all linked to the shooting death that you mentioned on Thursday. How are police, are they able to keep this under control? By the looks of these images, they're not.
They're struggling. I mean, they really are struggling in the areas we've seen. In the area we are in South London, they have basically just been trying to hold ground. They haven't been going in to try and arrest people. They've been outnumbered really where we are by a considerable margin. So they've been, you know, holding their line. Every so often, if it gets especially antagonistic towards them, they'll charge forward, you know, hitting out with batons and so on, and then reform their line again. So that, you know, this is the worst public order I've seen, I think, ever in London. We had the student protests at the back end of last year, but this is something very different. This isn't a political protest. This is really just pure sort of vandalism and looting, really. It is pretty depressing to see, not only here, but in lots of different areas of London, just copycat violence. I think people, you know, whether they're getting Twitter feeds and people are, you know, telling them to congregate, whether they're watching this on TV and thinking, OK, we'll go and do the same thing, I don't know. But it's a very sad day for London, just a year out from the Olympics.
It is a sad day, and it's just odd to look at those images and think that this is London. This is a world-class city, and it looks almost like, in parts, like a war zone. Dan Rivers, I thank you so much, Dan, for me live in Southeast London.